Hello everyone. Here we are. We are now finally at war. We are going to talk about the war for independence, for American independence. So, here's what's going on. The Second Continental Congress has become the National Congress. And the Articles of Confederation gave this Congress limited powers of diplomacy and waging war, but Congress could not raise taxes in order to pay for the war or even legislate. It was only permitted to make requests for money and supplies from the states, and states were very often uncooperative. Not everybody wanted this war, okay? The only advantage that the the American government possessed was that it was homeless. Congress moved to different cities over the course of the war. This meant that no capital city for Britain to capture. When a nation takes the capital of another nation, it is considered that that nation is defeated. For instance, the Nazis just needed to capture Paris in order to conquer France in World War II. All right, now, what did Britain have? Britain had a large army of professional, trained, disciplined, and loyal troops. They sent over the largest force ever assembled by Britain. 32,000 troops carried on 370 transport ships. Had a navy of 13,000 sailors on 73 ships, though some were in dry dock for repairs when war broke out. In addition, Britain is going to hire German mercenaries known as Hessians. Any of you who watched Sleepy Hollow? That was a Hessian. He was the headless horseman. Okay. The German state had owed Britain a lot of money, so in exchange, they sent over these Hessians. All right, so colonists, they had an existing fighting force that were the colony's state militias. These typically refused to cross state borders to fight, however. So Virginia would cover only Virginia, South Carolina would only cover South Carolina, Rhode Island would only cover Rhode Island. Their function was to defend their own state, and they were primarily loyal to their own state. They were often very uncooperative when asked to fight elsewhere, and like the militias in the French and Indian War, did not always work well with the regular army. Initially, the militia were filled with eager volunteers who soon returned back to civilian life. Volunteers then had to be replaced by conscription and community quotas, in other words, drafts, and how many people are in your city or in your region, then that's a proportion of those have to become soldiers in the war. The militias fought in few battles after a few months, but they did control the countryside. Their main roles in the war were to harass and intimidate loyalists and harass the British armies entering and crossing their state. Congress was allowed to authorize a continental army for the duration of the war only. This army initially patriotic affected farmers and artisans, but after several months of relative inaction, most of them returned to their own occupations and served part-time in the militia instead. The long-term army recruited young, disadvantaged single men attracted by the wages and by promises of bounty. They were recent immigrants, criminals, the unemployed, and apprentices who could leave their place if they enlisted. They were despised as the lowliest of the low by the rest of the colonists. Naturally, these men were inexperienced and ill-disciplined. The poor conditions, endemic disease, and lack of pay led to low morale, high rate of desertion, and failure to re-enlist. By the end of 1775, General Washington faced a huge challenge. He had to train and discipline this very mediocre army. The colonists did not have a navy. They had been relying on the British Navy. So, of course, the Americans promptly began building a navy, but building a ship takes many months. Instead, Congress authorized merchant vessels to become privateers, pirates, that attacked unarmed British supply ships. They actually captured around 2,000 British vessels. Now, what resources did the Britons have? Great Britain had more than 4 times the population of the U.S., 11.9 million versus 2.5 million. Britain could replenish her armed forces much longer than the Americans could, simply because of the numbers, and had more civilians to produce more materials, again, based on the numbers. Britons had huge stockpiles of war materials and were able to manufacture more. There were even factories in Britain as the Industrial Revolution had already begun. Not here in America, not yet. Britain had been the colonists' main source of manufactured goods, especially as the Navigation Acts had limited colonial manufacturing. Remember those. Naturally, Britain stopped supplying the Americans with manufactured goods and could stop other nations from doing so because they had control of the seas. They had enough vessels to blockade the coast. Britain also had money. The army was able to buy food and other supplies from American farmers desperate for income and unwilling to accept virtually worthless paper money that the Congress or the states issued. Now, what did the colonists have? This was a new nation, and it was pre-industrial economy with very little manufacturing before the Revolution. War materials would have to be produced in small family workshops, even in the home, as men wove cloth and women sewed it into uniforms, flags, etc. Women melted lead into bullets over the kitchen fire. After the war materials were made, it was still very difficult to get them to the troops, as North America did not have roads. It was just rough wagon tracks. It was dangerous to transport goods by sea because of the Brits up there. Thus, the Americans could not supply their armies. But the main reason why the Continental Army was starving and freezing in the first two winters was that the army simply lacked money to purchase supplies. While the men were struggling to survive at Valley Forge, the nearby British Army was comfortably housed, warm, and well-fed, thanks to the local farmers who eagerly exchanged food and supplies for hard cash. To make matters worse, the states had plenty of food and supplies, but Congress did not have the power to requisite supplies. State governments refused to provide money or supplies when requested, just as they had done in the French Indian War. The states' priority was to supply their own militias. And what about loyalty? Britain was confident that the rebels were just a small minority and that the majority of colonists were loyal British subjects who would not want to take up arms against their own king. 5,500 slaves ran away, and many joined the British Army, especially after they were promised their freedom in return. Many Indian tribes, notably the Iroquois, fought for the British. Much to the disappointment of the rebels, Canada and British West Indies did not join the rebellion. Many colonists were indeed still loyal to Britain, especially in the South. The South had it good. They had trading partners. Why would they want to cut off their ties with Britain? 50,000 fought for the British. However, loyalists were intimidated and oppressed by local patriots, and many did fear for their property, even their lives, and so were reluctant to step up. Britain assumed that slaves would rebel against their masters and seek freedom by joining the British armies, and that the Indians would see Britain as their only protection against the colonists' relentless encroachment on their lands. They thought they would ally with the British. Soon after the war began, Lord Dunmore, governor of Virginia, issued a proclamation promising their freedom to slaves who joined the British Army. And again, about 5,500 eventually served in the British Army, and many of them would end up in Canada. All right, colonists. How loyal were they? Some free blacks chose to fight for British, and over time, more and more blacks served in the Continental Army. Notice the black soldier in the picture painted at the time, up here in this particular preview. Washington initially refused to allow many African Americans into his army, but his need for manpower led Congress to permit free blacks to join the Continental Army. Numbers were so low by the winter of 1777 to 1778 that he allowed Rhode Island to raise an entire regiment of free black people. New England states gave their slaves freedom if they substituted for white men called up to fill state quotas. In other words, you would get your freedom if you would take the place of a white man. Eventually, between 1/5 and 1/4 of the Northern Continental Army was indeed black. Now, how did they win? Britain's war goal was to restore loyalty and suppress the rebellion. They had poor leadership, however, and they thought that this was going to be a limited war. In other words, there would be no attacks on all civilians warfare would cease during the winter and on religious holidays, and they were pursuing defeated armies was forbidden. The colonists, on the other hand, it was basically a free-for-all. They thought that it was guerrilla warfare. They thought that they could fight however way they want, and in fact, they did. They were undisciplined. Okay, this was not a standing army. They were not trained like the British were. All right, now, the roles of General George Washington and General Nathanael Greene. Okay, so George Washington was one of the greatest generals in history. Once he got the hang of it, remember that early on in his career, he was incredibly unsuccessful in his military efforts, but he kept at it and eventually got the hang of it. He knew that the only way to convince Britain to grant colony independence was to win by the rules of conventional warfare. So he had to win formal battles, not those guerrilla wars. So he developed a winning strategy. He would win the war by not losing it. That's a big duh. His tactics were evasion and attrition. He would evade the British army, avoiding battles that could lead to a decisive defeat and the destruction of the Continental Army. He would fight only when a battle could be won, such as Saratoga. He broke a basic rule of limited war by attacking the Hessians at Trenton on Christmas Day. That was not a good idea. Attrition meant he planned to make war last as long as possible to wear the British down, to make them war-weary both in North America and on the home front. Prolonging an expensive war with growing casualties would destroy British morale. Washington's army did not practice guerrilla warfare. Instead, he tried to use conventional tactics. All right, now, his army was taught and trained by Europeans, first by Lafayette, and then at Valley Forge by the Prussian Baron von Steuben. The role of foreigners in the French Revolution, in the American Revolution, is crucial. We would not have won had it not been for the French, who absolutely hated the British. All right. The Spanish, the French, the Dutch provided loans and sold Americans war supplies. They were also at war with Britain. And then finally, we have our alliance with the French. And the end of the war comes at Yorktown, at the battle with cutting off of Lord Cornwallis's army, keeping the British Navy out of the Chesapeake Bay. All right, so that's all for this one, this lecture. Go ahead and take a look at some of the stuff. We're going to talk about some of the primary sources in the next lecture.